Hello, I'm Ellis. This is my dad, Dr. Robert Molillo. In our first episode, we touched upon sort of briefly why we decided to start this podcast.
Right.
But I kind of wanted to dive deeper into that today. We're both from New York, and I moved down here sort of during the pandemic. I'd gone to acting school. I'm a songwriter. I'm a singer, and everything kind of got shut down, and I was in a very bad place mentally, not being able to live out my dreams, I guess. And I just spontaneously decided to move down to Nashville.
Many other people
Yes.
during that time, especially in your community of people.
Yeah, and it was pretty eye-opening for me because New York is a very creative place, but it's also a very big place, and there's all different types of people there. Nashville is very saturated with right-brain people in general.
Right.
And it seemed like it got more of that throughout the pandemic, people moving from California and New York and all the spots that are more spread out normally. And yeah, so I really got to see so many people that seemed to be struggling with the same things that I was struggling with mentally, but also blowing me away with their talent. It just seemed like I related to them a lot. So I figured starting this podcast could just help everyone out with understanding themselves and knowing that they're not alone. So with that being said, he is an expert in the brain. And so let's dive into what the differences between the left brain and the right brain are.
Yeah, well, I think, just kind of you highlighted two things really there that are like a lot of the subjects of what I've explored and studied and worked with, which is, what is talent? When you talk about someone being talented or gifted or intelligent, or what is that? I mean, everything comes down to the brain. That's the way I look at it, right? So everything can be explained in brain terms. But then also, when you talk about the issues that you had or other people have, the things that we want to talk about, mental health issue, physical health issues, what is that? Where does that come from? And then this concept of unevenness of skills, right? When I started researching neurobehavioral issues or things like ADHD and autism and OCD, one of the first concepts I came upon in the research was this uneven of skills, where meaning that people that are struggling with various types of diagnoses, they aren't deficient in everything. In fact, they're often really gifted or really talented in certain areas, but also struggle in others. And this imbalance. And that was something that caught my attention from the very beginning, again, with the question of, why and how does that relate to, what people are struggling with. So all the things that you talked about, that we talk about, like you being incredibly talented singer, songwriter, that was something that just from an early age, but you also struggled with basic spelling and reading and math and all that kind of traditional academic stuff. And so really it all comes down to really understanding the brain. It all comes down to really understanding brain asymmetry or the differences in the right and left brain. And really, I've spent my career looking at this and understanding, what these things are. When you're looking at an evenness of skills or someone that's uniquely talented, it's because there's certain areas or networks in one side of the brain that they're born with that are really strong, that are really hyper-connected, like physically communicating very, very fast, like really high processing abilities in that particular area of the brain that regulates a certain function. But when that's really high in one area, it actually dampens that same area in the other side so that it's not interfered with when it's doing its thing.
Yeah.
And it can make that area really kind of weak. And then that area being deficient can then create other symptoms. And it's kind of like this balance of who's going to win is most people, their strengths outweigh their weaknesses until they don't, right?
Yeah.
Where then the weakness, the classic example of somebody who's a genius in something, but then later on in life, they turn to drugs or they self-medicate or they commit suicide, or what is that about, right? Somebody that's famous and talented and incredible, and why would they also be so sad, right?
Exactly.
So that's that balance type of thing. And so that's where I've spent my whole career, and that's what I know pretty well. And I want to explain everything. And for me as a father, it's kind of like selfish because you as a right brain dominant person are naturally very private. You don't want to reveal your vulnerabilities, and you've always, since a child, kind of hid those things, your fears, your frailties, and I think most people that are right brain dominant, because ultimately the biggest fear of the right brain is rejection, right? Being left behind, being excluded, because that equals death in old days, right?
Yeah.
So, and for me, you've helped me learn so much by teaching me about what you felt, but you still have always held back a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm using this almost like, tell me, like, what questions have you had about yourself and why you do things? And I'll explain it really in brain terms and in body terms, but I'm really anxious to get to know my daughter at a deeper level because you're my, other than your mother and your brothers, my favorite person in the world. And obviously I love you and I want to know more about you. And you also help me because I've related and helped so many other people, and especially young girls, who struggled with the same things because I had insight from you and I could see them that they trusted me because it was like, how does this guy understand this that nobody understands?
Yeah, well, so from my own experience and understanding myself as a right brain dominant person with a left brain deficit, my understanding of the right brain is that you're an incredibly creative person. I guess you see the world more in color, or I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about right brain, left brain. And as you know, your mother's always telling me to talk even more about this because people love this. 'Cause
Yeah,
it really
it's
is
fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff. And nobody really talks about it that much because very few people truly understand it. But there's some people out there in the psychiatry, psychology world, neuroscience world that really have written, so much extensively about this. So everything I'm talking about has, a ton of scientific basis and research behind it.
Me being a very right brain person, he's a more balanced brain of a person. But
I think I started out more as a right brain dominant person, but I've created a left brain abilities. I've worked on that really because of my own fears and insecurities and wanting, to be good at something, right?
Yeah.
And help people. So the right brain starts off when we're born, and it comes online first, right?
Okay.
So the right brain is more active in the womb and for the first 2 to 3 years of life. And the right brain, because it comes online first, and because in almost everything we do, the right brain kind of reacts first because it's fast and it processes holistically all at once, instantaneously, and kind of knows everything. So the right brain in most things really kind of gets activated first, and the right brain develops first. And the right brain is really first and foremost about surviving, right? As a child, we need to survive. As humans, we need to survive. And so the right brain develops first, and its first thing is, how do I survive? And for humans, our number one survival strategy is we must be part of a group. In the Stone Age, you couldn't be walking around, the savannas of Africa and survive if you were alone for any length of time. You needed to be part of a group. Either you'd be killed by other people or you'd be killed by other animals. So you needed to be part of a group. Also, as babies, we can't survive alone. Human babies are the most immature and vulnerable of all babies. So we most dependent on our parents from the beginning. So attachment is critical to our survival. So our right brain from the very beginning is primarily wired to attach to other people. We want other people to like us. We want other people to like us so much that they'll stand up for us and protect us if a lion's attacking us, and that they would really, guard us like our parents would, and we want other people. And the biggest fear of the right brain is rejection, is being rejected by a group. Because if you were rejected by a group in the Stone Age,
and you're dead.
You were dead, right?
Yeah.
So that is kind of the driving principle of the right brain.
Okay.
And you can see how a lot of issues with right brain people, really revolve around that wanting to be loved, wanting to be liked, feeling like if wanting to be part of a social group, learning how to reading social cues, reading facial expression, reading body posture, tone of voice. The right brain is really the primary area of that we pick up on anything that anybody else is feeling. And, if you have a right brain deficiency, you may have no drive to attach, which is what we often see in people with right brain deficits, people that are on maybe the non-speaking end of autism spectrum, where they really prefer to be by themselves. They're not really attachment and approaching as small little children. They don't go up to other children. They're not interested in other children. Whereas you get a big right brain dominant, and those kids from the time they're one, they're crawling over to other children and like touching them and want to be a part of it. And from the very beginning. So even when we look at attachment disorders, it all starts, and attachment is primarily the main function of the right brain and everything associated with it.
Okay, because I want to do like maybe like side by side, like big picture, this something, whatever.
Right. So you want to talk about the left brain a little bit then?
Yes, I want, because I want something to compare it to.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about the right brain so much because that is basically what I run into every day and who I work with every day in Nashville for the most part. All very right brain people, which is just more, when you're an incredibly empathetic person, those are the people that are kind of driven to write songs and are very just aware of what everyone else is going through and can put that down on paper. But I'd like to kind of have like a comparison so people can understand like what the difference is between the right brain and the left brain, and how those work, and kind of the strengths of both sides and weaknesses, I guess.
Yeah, and it's important because we need both sides.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting because
we both have them. I don't really use my left too much. I would like to, but.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is one of the first person was a guy in the 1840s, the first person who really kind of looked at the whole brain asymmetry thing, even though the ancient Greeks back in the 3rd century BC talked about the right brain and the left brain and thought the right brain was more about perceptions and the left brain was more about understanding, right? So going back to, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago or more, we were talking about this, but really first kind of physician that looked at it was a guy named Arthur Wigand, and he was a physician in the UK area, and he noticed that some of the patients, when they died, when they did autopsies, that only half of their brain really was there. Like the other half of brain was gone by disease and these were people that they all knew in the town and that they were unremarkable in one way or the other. And then he went and spent 20 years really studying this and found many, many other instances of it. And then in that, he said that, okay, so it must be that both sides of the brain literally have their own consciousness and can support consciousness so that they could survive alone, right? So it can act as a brain.
Yeah.
But we literally have two brains then with two separate minds. And that conflict in a lot of mental health issues is when those two sides of the brain are in conflict with one another. Okay. And so the fact is some people don't have a whole brain and don't have both sides of their brain. And that was something that he was one of the first people to notice. Yeah. But yet they could be seemingly normal, right?
Okay.
So that's, a pretty fascinating thing. But so we need both sides of the brain. And in everything we do, both sides of the brain is working. And really the essence is that there needs to be this flow, this constant flow, that the right brain and left brain do very different jobs, but they need, in most cases, to work together. Right. They can't do like verbal and nonverbal communication. The left brain knows the words and the sequences of words and understands the meaning of words, and can link them all together in a logical syntax. But the right brain is the nonverbal, is the, subcontext. It's the emotions, it's the tone of voice, is facial expression, the gestures, what's between the lines, which really is 95% of communication is really that right brain communication. The words make up actually a very small part of it, but you can't have really a normal conversation if both of those aren't happening at the same time. Okay. If you have somebody, let's say, that with a right brain deficit who, let's say, is maybe more, traditional autism spectrum or ADHD or, really logical person, they may take things literally. Like they just, whatever the words say, that's how they see it. And they don't read any of that other stuff.
Like the subtext
right.
to everything that's
and they miss all of that. And then you get other people that don't understand the words, but understand everything in the meaning.
Yeah.
And that's true with, even with reading. I get kids that are dyslexic that can barely read. They may be 3 or 4 grade levels below their age, but yet they understand everything of what the story is about. And it's like, how could that be? How can they absolutely understand the main idea better than most kids,
right?
But yet they struggle to do the basic reading of the words? And then you get other kids that may read early with right brain delays, left brain strong, that have what's called hyperlexia, where they can teach themselves to read before the age of 2. I had one kid that could read at 8 months of age.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. But yet, when it came to comprehending what they were reading, they couldn't comprehend it. They couldn't put it all together. They could only focus. And that's kind of the basic theme. The left brain looks at the details. It looks at the small pictures. It looks at things linearly, one step at a time. It's slower and more deliberate and, looks at analyzing things and kind of then memorizing things. And the left brain is the consciously aware brain. So anything we're doing consciously, the left brain is the verbal brain. So the left brain has a voice. The right brain doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so part of, I think, why this is important is because our whole society has been moving really for the last couple of hundred years to really a left brain society. And the whole idea of the right brain and everything that the right brain is about is more and more being de-emphasized in everything we do. And so that's why I think it's so important to do something like this where we're speaking to that, because it is being, kind of ignored in the media and in everything really at this point in time. That whole right brain, when the right brain is so important and so big in humans and should be really, the as Ian McGilchrist, a very famous UK psychiatrist, the master, and the left brain should be more the servant. It's the other way around, and there's this constant battle between the left brain and the right brain in many people with mental health issues. And when the left brain becomes dominant, that's not the way it's supposed to be, but yet that's what everything in society kind of is driven to telling us now.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, so basically you're saying everyone is moving more towards a left brain mindset as a whole just because of technology and how that's all moving. But that's just interesting to me because I feel like you said, like right brain people are the ones that can read the room, read situations, read other people's emotions, understand what needs to be done. But I guess that's the constant, the back and forth battle.
Yeah. I think where a lot of conflict comes in, and like I said, the idea is that there's supposed to be this constant flow.
Yeah.
Where really more things first are kind of picked up in the right brain. And then we get like the kind of the context and the generalities or the gestalt of, the overall thing. And then goes to the left brain, flows there for the left brain to analyze it. And then kind of analyze what is this and what is, and organize it and put it in our mind so that we can grasp a hold of it and literally grab it, right? Like the left brain is for grabbing. And so we literally grasp it. And then it goes back to the right brain for us to go, okay, now how does this mean? How does this fit into everything in my life or what's going on or the context of now or, whatever. And so this needs to be the flow. And anything that blocks that flow, either from the right to the left or the left to the right, is going to be the foundation of any sort of mental health and really many physical issues. So
right.
What should happen is the right brain should pick things up first, again, get the big picture, kind of get an overall feeling for it, intuition. It's fast, it's big. The right brain synthesizes tremendous amounts of information all at once, constantly. It has a wide open attention that is also somewhat long-term sustained and vigilant, right? Looking for things, because the right brain's also looking for danger. It's looking to protect us. It's kind of the natural protector. And the right brain develops first and should be dominant as the left brain comes online. If something interferes with that development and the left brain comes online too early and the left brain gains dominance, that's certain types of problems and a lot of major mental health issues are that.
Right.
But if the right brain's too big and it overwhelms the left and can't flow to the left, then you can't get the details and you can't really analyze things and you can't organize things and you can't put them together into some sort of a structure and everything is just kind of chaotic.
Exactly what we were just talking about. Because I was trying to explain to my dad that outline of like episodes and stuff. And I was like, well, I have a whole bunch of ideas, but they're just written in different parts of the paper. And then I'll just say them out loud, and then you can make them make sense in an organization sense.
Right.
But so basically, from my understanding of your work, you're also saying, so this is all also what it means to be on the spectrum. So like when you're too right brain or too left brain, you're on the spectrum, which I feel like most people are, but to like different extremes, of course. But from what you've told me in the past, when one side is way too strong and the other side is too weak, it's not something that you can't fix. It's just what you're saying. There's something blocking there. They're on completely two different levels. So there's no way for them to communicate with each other, because it's like an adult and a child trying to speak the same language.
Exactly. And that's a really great way that you put it, because our research has really shown that when we look at what is the problem, right? What is the problem? People hear all different types of things. First of all, there's no such thing as chemical imbalances. That doesn't really exist, right? Mm-hmm. But there are imbalances in electrical activity and functioning and energy, and the way the brain is processing and the processing speed in different parts of the brain, and especially between the two hemispheres. So, and again, the vast majority of any sort of mental health and physical health issues is not due to genetic mutations. There are genes, and there's what we call epigenetics, which means the way our genes become expressed can be altered by our environment and what we're focusing on and what we eat and how we live our life and all of that. But those are all things that can be changed. So the idea that, well, you can't do anything because it's a genetic mutation, that's very rare. I mean, you have things like Down syndrome, but even in something like that, you have a wide variety of people that are, profoundly impaired, and others that are, brilliant, incredible. So, the genes don't tell anywhere near the whole story. It's a very small part of it, and they are absolutely not destiny. That's something that we know for a fact, but most people don't know that. They kind of are out there saying, well, aren't these things genetic? And because they may run in families, and no, there are traits that run in families. Mm-hmm. And mental health issues and conditions are built on certain traits and abilities, right? So you're a singer. My mother was a singer, right?
Yeah.
My mom was incredibly talented singer. And, my dad used to write, and you're a writer, and I'm a writer. And I'm an athlete, you're an athlete. My dad was an athlete. So there are things like that that run in families. Those are traits. You're tall, your mom's tall, right?
Yeah.
That's a trait. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But if you have an extreme version of that trait, then it could create vulnerability or weaknesses in the opposite of that trait.
Okay.
And that can lead to some sort of condition or something. And that's kind of the way, the way I'm looking at everything.
Okay. So if you were to explain, if you were an extremely left brain person or an extremely right brain person, what side of the spectrum would you be on? What are examples of things that you could struggle from on both sides?
Yeah. So again, people that are left brain dominant, if the left brain, let's say,
like
comes on
autism,
right? So you would see people that are highly what we consider intelligent, right? They really are people that are probably going to do well in the academic world, although, again, if they're too dominant that way, they might be so impaired that they, can't really even function in school, like someone, let's say, in the non-speaking end of autism, right? Mm-hmm. They're really all geniuses with their left brain. They're brilliant, but because their right brain is so disconnected from them, and they're so disconnected from their body, that they can't feel their body, they can't function, they can't control it. And so all the knowledge and all the information is actually in there, and they remember everything, and they have, photographic memories, but they can't show it, and it looks like they don't know anything. But there are variations of that. So people that are left brain dominant tend to be more logical and linear. They'll describe themselves that way. I like to take things one step at a time. I like things organized. I like to analyze things before I do. They're not someone that's just going to jump into something. They're not overly, they're fairly thoughtful from a standpoint that they like to analyze things. And the left brain does things more slowly. It's kind of slow. I think that's one of the frustrations of right brain people, is that right brain does things so fast and so big, and it analyzes so much information instantly, and the left brain needs to look at things one step at a time.
Would that be like why someone with right brain, like would be really good in comedy because they're like witty and quick and
Yeah.
but their brain sometimes is just working even faster.
Yeah, it's the same thing like, in athletics. When you were playing soccer and you were a great athlete and, when you're in the zone, right? What does it mean to be in the zone? It means you're not really thinking. Your body's just flowing. You're not thinking. You're not thinking about what do I do next? How do I kick this ball? Or what do I do? Or how am I what's the next thing I got to do in this? You're not thinking, you're just acting, you're doing. That's when you're in your right brain. And that's, a great athlete is many of them tend to be very right brain dominant because they get into that zone. They're just flowing. They're not thinking. They're not analyzing things. And it's instantaneous. And they see the whole field all at once. And they know exactly what everybody else is thinking and doing. And they can anticipate, what the other people are doing. And they kind of know where they're not going to be. And, and that's just a flow. And if you ask them to be able to explain how they do it, they can't.
Yeah.
And that's the point, right? Because that's why, society as a whole has kind of, diminished the right brain importance and made it sound like it isn't important, like it's more basic, the whole, the right brain is really more the minimal brain. It's actually been referred to that, the non-dominant brain,
Really?
the smaller brain, because we tend to think since, Western civilization has developed with the development of language and writing and mathematics and science, that has become more the focus of our world. And that is more and more been looked at as, that's the height of knowledge and intellect. And, everything is that, understanding facts and doing mathematics and analysis and higher education and all of that. And the fact is, it isn't. To the right brain, that's really slow and kind of cumbersome and frustrating because the right brain does things so fast and so big that being slowed down to live in a left brain world is really frustrating because it's like, wait, I already know the answer to this. Why do I have to show you all my work, right? You get children.
Oh, yeah, God. Well, so then that plays into like, because would having ADD be more of a a left brain deficit?
Well, see, that's the thing. We can do a whole show just on ADHD because there's a right brain and a left brain version.
Yeah,
of it.
Lord knows I have it. I don't know in what way, but
there's a lot of people in the creative world and that are right brain dominant that have a diagnosis of ADD, not usually ADHD, and the difference means that there is actually 3 different types of ADHD. One is it's all ADHD. There's no such thing as in psychology as ADD and ADHD. It's all ADHD now, but there's type 1, type 2, type 3.
Okay.
Type 1 is only the inattentive type, which was traditionally used to be, just ADD. So without the hyperactivity, right? And that is more of a left brain delay. And that is more where the right brain, it's not really an attention deficit. It's kind of a misnomer. The right brain has this big open attention to everything all at once, and it's very vigilant, meaning it's looking for danger. So the right brain is kind of paying attention to everything at the same time, which can look like an attention deficit, but it's really not.
So is that what I have?
That's what you have. Exactly. Yeah. Whereas the classic ADHD that I've written papers on and we've studied and we know about is really where the right brain is deficient. And the left brain, there's 5 different types of human attention, and there's only one of them that really is regulated primarily by the left brain, and that's highly detailed, hyper-focused attention. So really, when you have really super intense attention, that's usually short-term, and it's, really very, very detail-oriented. And we see that, like someone, let's say, who's autistic may come in this room and see a little speck of paper on the ground and see that and see it where nobody else would notice it.
Okay.
And be hyper-focused on that, right? Or get hyper-focused on certain things, but not be able to pay attention, let's say, to big picture, and not have sustained attention, or sit in a class and listen to something that's really boring, that is what the right brain has to be able to do. And so what we see is that typically the left brain is hyperactive and impulsive and aggressive and really doesn't have much social awareness and is really more individualized and more goal-directed and more reward-driven. So the left brain is more like a little ADHD kid running around, touching everything, grabbing everything, yelling, screaming, impulsively, completely unaware of what they're doing to other people around them and unaware of social rules. And but maybe very smart in school and have a great memory for details, but they can't really get themselves to be quiet and focused, and so that's more the classic ADHD type, where there's hyperactivity and impulsivity, and they're complete opposite personality types, but in some ways they can look similar, and that's where you get big brain creative right brain people, and again, when we say creative, the right brain and the left brain are both creative in different ways. There's right brain music, there's left brain music, there's right brain art, there's left brain art. But they do it in different ways. And so, the traditional, artistic, right brain driven person who's really more socially driven and more emotionally driven and has really more new ideas. The right brain likes newness. It likes novelty. It doesn't like to do the same thing over. It doesn't like routines. It doesn't like familiarity, gets bored really easily. That's another reason why someone who's right brain dominant can look like they have ADD, because they really get bored real quick. And partly it's because they understand things really quickly. And they're like, okay, I get it, move on. Right?
Yeah, I do. Whenever someone talks really slow, I feel like I'm dying. I'm like, please, just speed it up a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. And I felt this, like, as I was thinking about this and I was coming from the airport last night, I'm behind this guy who's walking really slowly in a hallway.
Ooh, that drives me nuts.
And I'm like, I want to get by this person, but I can't get by them. But obviously I'm going to be polite and not shoved by them.
Yeah.
But I'm like, and it felt like it was forever that, and I felt like, okay, that's what the right brain is like most of the time. The right brain already knows the answer, already figured it out, but we're told that, no, you need to go back and be able to learn it the left brain way and then be able to recite it the left brain way and learn it through rote memorization over and over again.
Wow.
And be able to remember that and recall it verbally out loud, right? Where the right brain doesn't want to do any of that. It's like, I know it already. I don't need to remember it. I understand it.
Yeah, like I figured it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't need to have like all the notes.
But the thing is, the right brain people are told they're dumb because, no, you're not doing it the way you're supposed to learn it in school, and you can't remember these facts, and you can't remember these details, and you're not doing it the right way, and you're not, writing is sloppy, and things are not organized in a linear way, and you can't verbalize it as well, and so you must be slower when actually the right brain is so much faster. And I think learning disabilities in many cases in these right brain dominant kids, people that have dyslexia or classical learning disabilities, the learning disability is you're trying to slow them down to meet a left brain world.
That's so interesting.
And they're told that they're dumb and slow.
Yeah.
When actually it's that they're super smart and fast. And they know instinctively, their brain knows they're smart. And they know that they know things that other people don't know. But they're constantly be told, no, you're not smart, you're dumb. And that conflict is one of the things I think that causes such severe anxiety in people with right brain dominance.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. I mean,
do you feel like you felt like that when you were a kid sometimes? Because, I know that, school, you worked really hard in school. You had to work so hard in school. And I think like you were working hard because you were trying to slow down your right brain to fit into a left brain world, but you were made to feel like you weren't smart.
Yeah, it's funny because even when I was in, I think I told you this, but when I was in college, because I was studying classical music because that was all that they offered there, but I was always just like writing songs and playing guitar, but I wasn't very good at like writing compositions and everything. And that is just a very like mathematical side of your brain that you have to be good at. And I took this class where like they would play notes and then I would have to write the notes out on like exactly how like, and it was impossible. I could not do it. I literally was paying this guy with like bottles of whiskey to just like kind of teach me how to like do it.
Bottles of whiskey.
Yeah, I was like, oh, dude, I will
Full
buy you
bottles,
whiskey.
or
Just
did
please.
you drink the whiskey at the same time?
Yeah, I probably was like, well, let's open it. But I remember like because I was basically the only one in that program that was writing contemporary music, and everyone was so talented and on the other side of things. But it was just like at the time, I didn't realize it was different sides of the brain. I was just like, wow, I'm an idiot. But I remember I failed it, and then I had to retake the class the next year, which was just mortifying. And then like this dude, Bobby, who lives here now, he's super cool. But he was sitting next to me, and I was like, oh, Bobby, you failed this too. Like, God, this class, it was so hard, whatever. And he was just like looking at me, and then my teacher was like, and let me welcome the TA, Bobby. And he was just like the TA. I was like, oh, I am the only idiot in this school. Perfect. So yeah, that was very embarrassing, and I felt very, very dumb during all of that.
I think a really good analogy of this, because there's also a story when you were in high school where you told me this. But so most people, I think, if they're not in the music industry, and I'm not, and I'm learning from you, and I love hearing about it. But when you're writing songs, are you writing down the notes of a song?
No,
are you writing
it's so
down
hard.
the words,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, I'm writing the words, but I can't like.
But I mean, as people, if you're in a room with creative people that are, right brain writers, right?
Yeah.
Is anybody like writing down music or
No.
writing the notes, or has sheet music that you're filling out?
No, everyone's just like playing guitar and like
Yeah.
talking. Yeah.
I saw an interview with Paul McCartney where he said he still doesn't know how to read or write music, right?
Yeah.
People don't understand that and that's a good example, right? Meaning writing great music. I mean, has written more music than anybody, and writing great music, like you and others like you, it's not an analytical thing where you're actually writing it down, but you're creating this beautiful music. And really, music is the language of the right brain, right? The left brain is verbal. The right brain, the language, the actual language is really more musical.
Yeah.
Listening to tones and notes and tone of voice and emphasizing emotions and negative and positive things of it, right? So the tempo of it, that is the language of the right brain, which is naturally more musical. And that, I think, is translated. So music is like the right brain form of language. And it is holistic, and you think in words and music, and you're putting it all together, but you're not then stopping. Imagine how frustrating that is, and that used to frustrate you because you could write like that from the time you were like 9 or 10 years old. But then you were in high school, and you were told that, no, you have to learn how to write music and write the notes, and you're going to take this song, and then you have to literally write it out and put all the notes in there and everything, and like a composer, like Mozart or something. And
Yeah.
that's not, so that Mozart was a very left brain dominant type of music, right? And yours was the exact opposite. And again, the right brain naturally would be like, why do I need to write the music down? I know the song now. Like, I heard it once, I love it. Like, you could hear a song once when you were a kid and you would instantly know that song and you could sing it.
Yeah.
Like, you would memorize it immediately. You didn't have to memorize it, but yet if you had to memorize the times tables, it was really hard for you. The left brain facts.
Yeah, and it's interesting, just because I'm also just thinking like from going to acting school and everything, and I think I'm gonna butcher the definition of acting, and my acting teacher's gonna kill me because we used to have to like recite it every single day. But it's just basically making unreal or living out like full truth in unreal circumstances. But it's being able to just put yourself in a place of like all of these different emotions and live that out fully. And that's sort of what you were saying about just like the nonverbal, just like emotions and everything, like understanding people's emotions so well and being able to understand what somebody else would be going through, even if you've never experienced that. But just right brain people being able to like feel other people's emotions, take them on as their own. You can put that out in songwriting, or you can act it out in acting, or however you do it. But it's all the tiny little subtleties of what people are putting out there and what's behind the words and what everyone's feeling.
Yeah, because again, it goes back to that right brain, first of all, trying to make us, be part of a group, get along with other people, understand other people. The right brain, is the ultimate empathizer. So empathy, being able to take somebody else's perspective and really understand it, not just from you sit back and kind of analyze their behavior, but literally you put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah.
And you take their perspective on it, which is the difference between the way the right brain and the left brain. The left brain can analyze somebody and kind of figure out and try to say, okay, why are they doing this? And, what are they doing? But the right brain literally takes that person's perspective and moves into their feelings. And we mimic things with our right brain so that we literally mimic with our facial expression and in our brain, we take the same tone of voice and we say, okay, now what's that person feeling?
Yeah, I become any person I hang out with for more than 15 minutes, I become them. I'll have a British accent by the end of the conversation. I'll be like using my hands weird. My whole voice will change.
Yeah, I used to say that about your mother. I used to have to watch what movies we watch because, if we watched a movie where, let's say there was like a female like super agent or something where she was like karate chopping or whatever. Pretty soon she'd start hitting me or whatever. I'd be like, all right, you're not that person on the screen.
Yeah, actually I do have to be careful with the shows I watch because I like instantly take on whatever that show is. That's my new life. And I remember I was watching one like very dramatic show and I became like very depressed and I was like always like waking up every day like, oh my God. And then I was like, wait, that's not even my life. I've just been watching that show so much that now I'm so stressed out, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. So yeah, I had to stop doing that.
And that's a good example of it. The right brain is because it's empathy, because it's taking other people's, it really adopts that other person's emotions and their feelings. And you feel that. So what happens is, when we talk about an empath, it's literally the right brain is empathic. And it's, I literally take on that person's emotion. I take on their pain. I take on their feelings. And that, for a small child that doesn't know any difference, can be unbelievably overwhelming. So some people, when they're young, they're so painfully shy and they avoid eye contact, where they might even look like they're autistic, but it's really that there's such a flood of information coming at them from other people and subtle facial expressions, and they're instantaneously, immediately taking on that emotion and mimicking it because they don't know anything different, because the right brain does things subconsciously or unconsciously. The right brain doesn't form conscious memories. The right brain doesn't do anything deliberately. The right brain just does.
Yeah.
And so when a child is really gifted in the right brain like you are instantly, you're like, you take on and you connected to people. And I can immediately tell the difference between a child that's right brain dominant, left brain dominant by just looking at their eye contact. From a small child, they'll come in and they'll be looking at you and smiling. Sometimes, again, if they're really right brain dominant, they might avert their gaze because it's too much information. But for the most part, their face is open and looking and searching your face, where a kid who's, left brain down, they don't even look at your face. They're like, where are all the objects in the room? Everything. Like, what are things I can play with and touch and analyze and look at and, and do something with them and use as a tool and some inanimate object. The left brain likes inanimate things. The left brain isn't connected to our body as much. It's not really connected to our emotions as much. And the left brain is more, ego-driven. So even if we look at Freud's work, ego is really the left brain. Id is really the right brain, the subconscious. And even in Freud's work, it was all about getting the id to tame the ego to tame the id, meaning using the intellect to calm these, more primitive emotions, when really now a lot of modern psychology people are really looking at that and saying, no, actually, even the way we do psychology, really, which was, talking and, realizing that we talk about talk therapy and that talking is the cure. It's really actually listening is the cure. And the right brain and the way we empathize, and a really great therapist, it's not about talking, it's about their listening ability. It's about their actually being able to take the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about just analyzing things and talking about it cognitively, which is where traditional psychology, now it's moving more back towards that right brain, that no, the right brain is actually really big and intelligent, but it doesn't fit into our classic, what we've thought of as intellect and intelligence. And that conflict, I think, like I said, is where a lot of right-brain people suffer, and they get vindication through their art or through athletics or through dance or through creation or through design or through, building social relationships. And that's where their strength lies, right?
Yeah.
Not in the analysis, not in the details, not in the organization per se, but yet the majority of the world is rewarded for those skills in particular. And even though artists and athletes are rewarded for them doing it, it's still, we look at, like the dumb athlete or the dumb actor, or you know what I mean? Like people that aren't smart, but they're creative, when actually that in itself is probably the purest form of true intellect.
Why didn't anyone tell me this when I was a kid? Well, I guess you would tell me this, that I was smart, but I didn't understand it.
I hoped I did.
No, you did.
But you've actually helped me understand this. I didn't understand this to this level when you were a kid either. And, you were so good at masking all of these things because you didn't want us to feel bad. And you also didn't want to feel, relate your own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So you hid all of this stuff. And it wasn't really till much later, because you just seemed like you were such a happy child, it seemed like, and you were, so good, and you did everything, and everybody loved you, and you were a great athlete, and you had all this music. And it wasn't until you started writing about all these emotions and we were like, how does a 9 or 10-year-old have these kinds of deep emotions that are running through her head that she's writing a song about it, right?
Yeah.
So again, right brain develops first. Right brain is driven initially by attachment and connection to other people. And so it's driven by social connections with other people. The right brain also is where because it's online first, is where we're really sensing the world around us most. So all these different sensations that are coming into the brain, children when they're first born, they only see like blurry outlines of things, and they see mainly shades of gray. They're not really seeing details or colors. So the right brain is always kind of seeing that way. The right brain kind of gets the big picture of everything. It's not looking at details. It's getting the overall image. The right brain is fast, and it looks for little subtle movement in our environment. But the right brain also senses our body and connects with our body. We need immediately, non-verbally, to explain to our parents when we're in pain, when we're hungry, when we're thirsty, when we're hot or cold, when we go to the bathroom, or, when we, are tired. And we need to be able to relate that to our parents. And so we need to feel that. In the right brain, there's an area called the insula, where we really feel our body and connect to our body. We get a sense of 3D of the world. So spatially, the right brain is spatial. It helps us navigate movement. It starts with our big muscles, our postural muscles, as we move through the world, and gross motor development, and coordinating our body to work as one unit, to take these pieces to work as one, to make the world and put it all together into, the meaning, and look at the big picture, and attach to other people, and feel our body and connect to our body, and then use that to read that on other people so we can build those relationships, so we can understand other people. In understanding ourselves, we understand others. And so the empathic brain, the social brain, is all right brain. And so, any sort of attachment disorders and most psychopathology, most emotional issues, most, mental health issues have to do with not developing that right brain, or not, interacting, learning how to self-regulate our emotions through interactions with our mother and our father, and reading, that's what that whole relationship is about. Learning for a baby to self-regulate, soothe ourselves, calm ourselves. The vagal system, the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, all of that is right brain. Then the left brain kicks in, and the left brain now starts to form conscious memories. The right brain we don't have. Most people have what we call childhood amnesia, meaning they don't remember before the first 3 years of life, because the right brain isn't forming conscious memories. Then the left brain does that. And the left brain now is all about, okay, now I want the details. I want to know why. I want to know what. A child at that age, was just like, why? Why, mommy? Why, daddy? They want to know all the details. And the left brain's more motor driven. The right brain's more sensory. It's more sensing and feeling. The right brain's more doing and acting. And the left brain is really the motor, and the right brain is more the brake. Like, wait, be stop us. And the left brain is doing things detailed in sequence, one at a time, analyzing it, and really, not being that interested in other people, being more ego-driven, more self-driven, more setting our own goals, and being able to then figure out how to get to those goals and kind of predicting the future and remembering things and facts and details so we can use it on how to predict the future and how to analyze it and how to be able to get that goal and figure out a way to get there. And verbal communication is part of that, where we start to speak, because now we want to give more details than you can get by just looking at somebody's emotions or facial expression. It's more sequential, it's logical, it's linear, it's linguistic, it's more, again, rote memorization. The left brain likes familiarity, where the left brain likes newness. The left brain doesn't like surprises. It doesn't like unpredictability. The right brain craves that. It craves more spontaneity. And so the left brain, when we look at too much left brain, that's people that are so analytical or literal, or really, the left brain only has two primary emotions, really, which is either happiness or anger. And I get a lot of people that, I had a mom the other day who came in talking about her autistic child and said she only has two emotions. She's either angry or laughing, like giddy, silly laughing, or then boom, anger.
Yeah.
And the left brain is also pride. So the left brain is naturally, again, ego-driven. It's naturally more narcissistic, right? Too much pride is narcissism. Too much joy is mania. Too much anger is obviously an anger management problem, or leads to violence or aggression. Whereas the right brain emotions are things like sadness, fear, being afraid of things, sense of danger. The right brain is more also shame and guilt and embarrassment, which are huge, big right brain emotions. Again, fear of rejection sensitivity.
Like anxiety and depression.
Yeah, so that whole thing together, having both anxiety and what is depression? Depression is too much sadness, too little joy.
Wow.
Right? Now, if you combine that with shame and guilt, that's the definition of major depressive disorder, okay? But you look at, mania, it's like basically too much giddiness, too much joy, too much silliness.
Yeah.
And not enough, sadness, or not enough, shame or embarrassment or guilt.
Right.
We get, people that, when you look at a psychopath, what is a psychopath? Somebody that's highly intelligent, that can remember things and maybe was very academic, but has very little empathy or guilt or shame about anything.
Right.
And maybe a bit of narcissism, and that's where you get a psychopath. Someone who doesn't, really feel guilt or shame, and is more about, okay, what do I want? What I got to do to get it? And I don't care what I do to other people.
Right.
Because I'm not going to feel guilt and shame about it.
Yeah.
And I don't care, I don't care about other people so much. I just care about this goal and what I want, and what I need to get, and what I need to do to get it.
Yeah.
And so, the left brain is more that analytical. So we see that we've been moving as a society since basically the Renaissance, which was more about beauty and art and everything, to more analytical, writing and mathematics and science. And we've been moving more and more and more there. And with technology and computer technology and the digital world, and we're moving, kids have to go to Ivy League schools, and they have to get that college education and higher degrees, and that's true intellect, and that's sophisticated knowledge, and all that other fluffy stuff is not really knowledge. It's not really mainly important, when it really, in reality, for most of humankind, the exact opposite. That was what you needed to survive. That's what you needed to be great in the world. And, that whole level of intellect is actually so big, but it's completely ignored now and put down. And I think, again, that's part of the issues that right brain people struggle with.
This is going to make so many right brain people happy to find out that they've been smart all along.
Absolutely. It's really important. And obviously, we know left brain people are smart, right?
Well, yeah.
But they're smart in different ways.
Yeah.
And that diversity, is what has caused the humans to survive, and we need that diversity. People that think differently and that are differently, but the left brain doesn't generally like that. The left brain wants everything to the left brain is about what it knows and repeating what it knows and basically learning more. Ian McGilchrist has described the left brain as a hall of mirrors, that it's all just more of what it already knows. It wants to see what it already knows and get more of that and look at it in different ways, but it's what it already knows and it wants it to fit into a box and it wants everything to be neat and tidy. And that's not the right brain at all.
Wow. Okay, well then I guess we have a lot more to talk about in these next upcoming episodes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for all of us out there, because
My pleasure.
it's not very common knowledge. And if you guys have any questions about any of this, you can send them in, and yeah, see you next time.
Come and sit with us and be on our podcast.
Yeah,
Let's talk about it.
let's talk about it.